Hello, everyone. My name is Bill Daniels, and I'm the project leader for Native Seed Communities, which is a project of the Indiana Native Plant Society. I'm very glad you've joined us tonight for Autumn Brunelle's presentation. Before I introduce Autumn, I'd like to share with you just a few slides. So if you'll give me a moment to open up or share my screen and open up the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so what I would like to do is just share with you who Native Seed Communities is. Some of you are quite familiar with what we're doing, but others, this may be completely new to you. But Native Seed Communities, as I mentioned earlier, is a project of the Indiana Native Plant Society. And the mission of the Native Seed Communities is to promote networks of native plant enthusiasts working together regionally to procure or collect, to acquire, to process, and then to propagate native plant seeds. And this is to increase the presence of these beautiful, ecologically appropriate native plants in all of our landscapes. And just to give you some examples of some of the things that we're doing here in Monroe County, we do some seed collecting. This is one of the events with Sycamore Land Trust. We take those seeds, we grow them out, or we sow them, I should say, first off. We sow them, and we primarily do the autumn, winter sowing type of activity which we'll be talking about. If you're not familiar with that, actually at the April presentation, and then comes spring, they pop up, and late spring, early summer, we separate those seedlings out from the trays, and as you can see, growing native plants from seed can be so successful. You can grow so many plants, and so we had a potting party up there. That's with the MC Iris native plant sale, and then the lower right hand corner shows the plant sale in which we had hundreds of people coming out to buy these plants as a fundraiser. We've got a lot of resources. We have a huge amount of information on our Indiana Native Plant Society's website. Growing native plants from seed is the where you would go under landscaping, under the landscaping tab. We also have a Trello board that we put all of our presentations in there, all of their handouts. We are even starting to post in there some beautiful seed stuff that Jillian Harris has been putting together for the communities. We've got a YouTube channel with, I should say, a playlist on the Indiana Native Plant Society's YouTube channel. And then we are doing presentations. I did want to make you aware, I'm going to be talking about growing native plants from seed at our next meeting, which is Tuesday, April the 25th. So hopefully you'll come out, and we're trying to do these every month. And I think I'm going to mention it at the end, but if you know of anyone that would be a good speaker for our monthly events, please do communicate that to me. I will have my email, at least our community's email, in the chat. And so would highly welcome anything like that. So, but in addition to the presentations, we do have a presence on social media, Facebook, under Indiana Native Seed Communities, as well as we just started Instagram as a committee, and we're growing that as well. So just a little bit of housekeeping. The session is being recorded, as you may have seen that already. It will be available in probably a week or two on Trello as well as YouTube, and I will be communicating that out through the signup.com system that when that goes live, because I know a number of people are often not able to make the call, so I'll communicate that when it's available. Keep yourself muted if you would, unless you're invited to unmute. And please, any questions that you have, write those in the chat. We will have some time at the end, and Autumn will be able to address those questions, and I will do my best to field those. I also have Deb Howson helping me with some of the technical aspects, et cetera. So, all right, I'm going to end this show. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so let me introduce Autumn. Autumn Brunelle, an Anishinaabe citizen of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, discovered her passion for learning from and teaching about nature while growing up on the Leech Lake Reservation in Cass Lake, Minnesota. After graduating from Dartmouth College in 2015 with a BA in Environmental Studies and Native American Studies, Autumn has continued to grow her passion for the natural world through her desire to create collaborative and community-based environmental programming and natural resource management. She has been able to share, teach, and develop this passion while working for and with international and local nonprofits, the National Park Service, various governmental organizations, and even through grant-funded scientific research projects. I now give you Autumn Brunelle.
Hello, everybody. I wasn't sure we were doing the full introduction, so now you know everything there is to know about me. And that's it. The presentation's over.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out and choosing to share your evening with us. I'm very excited to present and talk to you about something that I will admit I'm fairly new at, but have been a huge fan of for a couple of years now. And we are slowly working on incorporating it into our county parks community garden program. And I'll tell you a little more about that as my presentation goes on. I'm totally fine with anyone who wants to have questions answered immediately in the chat. I'll do my best to see them, but I will do my absolute best to make sure that there's time at the end for you to ask any questions, and hopefully that I can answer for you. So without further ado, we can get this show on the road. And if there is any point where you cannot see my slide, or you can't hear me anymore, I believe you should be able to raise your hand and let us know that. And we can try to get that going. Let me. All right, here we go. You'd think after years of Zoom, I'd have this under control, but we're ready now. So today we are going to be talking about no-dig garden bed preparation. I want to reiterate that even though I'm saying garden bed, I'm not specifically talking about like fruits and vegetable gardening that you might be thinking of. This also applies very heavily to native plant gardening. All of the principles are the same. And if I have examples of, well, I do have quite a bit of examples from a vegetable garden bed, but I have also practiced this in my own yard and in my own life at my house, trying to make sure that, one, I don't have to mow as much. So that's nobody has time for that. And two, just having so much more offerings for wildlife, especially in more urban areas, is very important to me. And so I have tried these methods that I'll be talking about with native plant beds as well. So just keep that in mind while we're going on. I may continue to say gardening, just because that's where my mind is at this spring, but I do mean native gardening, native plant gardening as well. So you heard just a little bit about who I am, but I like to introduce myself again to let you know that one, I am a naturalist. And so that means that I'm trained in environmental education. I do have a little bit of a background in environmental science. I was a fisheries biologist for a little bit, and I just finished up a research project on climate change. But for the most part, I am an educator, and I do my best to make my programming and my information as accessible as possible, as best that I can. And if there's anything that you do have further questions on, do feel free to interrupt me. I do also like to mention that I am from northern Minnesota, and I mention that because sometimes I say words really weird, and all the kids that I teach have no problems just yelling at me. I think I saw in the chat that there's someone from Ontario, so welcome. You'll probably be the only person to understand me, especially every time I say the word root, which is root. I have to really focus on saying that one. So if there's something that I say that does sound a little funny, again, don't hesitate to say, what in the world are you saying? I deal with kids a lot, and they have no issue saying that. So that's who I am. I do have my contact information at the end, but I'm sure you'll learn a little more about me along the way. So in this presentation, I'm going to do my very best to teach you about switching to NoDig method. You might be someone who is already doing no-dig or no-till, as it's often called. And if you are, then I hope that you learn a little something extra. And if you're not, and you're just the spokesperson for tilling, then leave now. No, don't leave now, but definitely keep an open mind, and hopefully you'll also learn something along the way too. And so in this presentation, it's going to be split into 3 parts. Part 1 will be an introduction, not to me, but an introduction to soil in general. You might be thinking, well, wait, I'm here to learn about native plants. And you are, but we have to start by talking about soil before we can talk about plants. So I'll tell you just a little bit about that. After you learn everything there is to know to be a soil scientist, I'll then get into no-dig methods. I have 2 methods to share with you, but I will be focusing heavily on one, and that is the one that I've had the most success with. And then after I just throw all sorts of information at you, I will do a very brief recap and make sure to leave time for any questions. So starting now, an introduction. Again, you might be thinking, why is soil important? Why do I need to know about soil to just grow a plant? Especially native plants. A lot of people have a kind of tunnel vision when it comes to native plants, and they think that if you just kind of plant a native plant anywhere in its native region, that it will grow. And it definitely has a better chance of growing. But if you want it to be super successful and become that integrated part of the ecosystem, you're going to also want to focus on soil health before you start planting. So why do we even need to care about it? Not only is it critical for the growth and survival of native plants, but it's also its own species, its own mini ecosystem. And that's something that works together with our native plants, our shrubs, and our trees. And so with soil, your plants get all of the nutrients that they need to grow. They get all of the water they need to grow. There's microbial activity within the soil that is extremely important to soil health and plant growth. And without that, you end up finding that you have to do a lot more tedious care for your plants to make sure that they're thriving. Soil health is also a great way to avoid a lot of common diseases. For example, if you're growing tomato plants, a lot of the times you might, or see, we can back up to zucchini plants. Those are the ones that often get hit with powdery mildew. If you have great soil health, a lot of those diseases and those fungi are actually going to become either absorbed or eaten by other microbial organisms, and it will lessen that impact of your plant getting stuck with disease. And then backing out a little bit, and kind of more of an upsetting statement, soil degradation is a huge issue. There was a documentary that came out not too long ago that I believe is called Kiss the Ground. And in that documentary, it talks about how topsoil is essentially an endangered species at this point. And that is just from years and years of agriculture, of runoff, of industrialization and urbanization. And so it is vital to take care of our soil health so that everything else that revolves around soil can also thrive. So if you don't take anything away and you decide you hate gardening after this, remember that it's still important to care for our soil. And so when I keep saying soil health, what do I mean? A healthy soil is going to look something like this. Not a cartoon, essentially. If your soil does look like a cartoon, I don't know if I'll be able to help you today, but you do want your soil to be able to have a lot of these layers. So this kind of darkest spot closest to where the roots are, that's going to be most of your topsoil. That's where most of the organic matter is going to lie. And everything beneath it is going to kind of have a cascading effect down on where they get their nutrients, where water can be stored, and so forth. We talk a lot about soil structure when it comes to soil health, and it's a little tricky to think about, but you want your soil to be full of air pockets. You don't want it to be super compact. You want air pockets so that critters and good organisms for the soil, like our worms, can get through it. Your soil structure is also going to help a lot with airflow, which a lot of plants do still need that little bit of airflow. It's also going to help with water retention. And so if you have, if you're based in Indiana, which it seems like a lot of us are, you might be very familiar with the beauty of our clay soil. And clay soil is extremely compact. So you could squish it in your hand, open your hand, and it will stay in that ball. It's not going to roll. It's not going to just kind of dissolve in your hand. When something is very compact, it is very hard for it to hold water because there's nowhere for it to actually hold that water. It needs those air pockets. So we talk a lot about soil structure. When you have organic matter and when you have good soil structure, you'll also have a lot more nutrients available. So when you are kind of at like big box stores, or if you're at your local garden center and you're looking to purchase soil, there's going to be 3 numbers on all of your soil packaging. And that's going to be the amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that's in that soil. Instead of having to go out and buy that constantly, when you have organic matter, when you have soil structure, when you have microbial activity, you are automatically going to have a better range of nutrients available to your plants, just due to all of these different things working together. And I'll continue to talk a little more about the details of each and what they provide to your garden bed. Healthy soil also has that microbial activity. And so if you see worms in your soil, it's a great thing. If you see a lot of what kind of looks like white moss, white mold, that's also phenomenal. That's something called mycelium. And mycelium and worms and other bacteria are things that are going to help to break down organic matter. They're going to help create some activity. They're going to create that air pockets, more porous soil, and they're going to provide a lot of things that need to be essentially digested by little bitty guys, and then brought out and absorbed by your plants. In general, you also want to have a good pH balance in your soil. The best range is from 6 to 7. However, there are several types of plant species, including native plants, that can survive in things that are a little more basic or a little more acidic. And then I mentioned worms. The living organisms are a great sign of soil. A lot of naturalists have a joke about the most common question we get asked, or people will call and they'll say, how do I stop the moles in my lawn? And for naturalists, it's very exciting because that is a sign of great soil health. And also the answer for anyone that's curious is usually by the time you notice mole holes, the moles are already gone and into another yard. So you kind of solve your problem by the time you notice it. But having a lot of those living organisms present in your soil is going to, again, provide to that overall soil health. And I know I'm not going into the deep nitty gritty. If you prefer that, I'm happy to do my best to answer those questions at the end. So we're talking about no-dig, and the opposite of no-dig is tilling. And a lot of people, a lot of agriculturalists, and even people who are just planting flower beds do still till. And that's totally understandable. Tilling is really helpful. It makes it so much easier to plant in. However, it ends up giving you a lot of negative impacts in the long run. So when you till, you are actually cutting up that layer of topsoil, you're cutting up that layer of organic matter, and you're giving it almost too much airflow. You're making it really fluffy to the point that it's going to compact. You're breaking that great porous soil structure, like this little cartoon with the worms. You're breaking that up and removing the air pockets. So when you water, when you step on it, just general, when it rains, that soil is going to get compacted and pushed down further into itself. And when you have compact soil, water cannot infiltrate it. So water essentially will land on top and just immediately run off and leave. It's really hard for your plant's roots to grow. With native plants, we often are talking about the benefits of native plants being that they have really deep roots. So they have deep root systems, and those deep root systems are going to help us with erosion. They're going to help us with soil stabilization. But if your soil is so compact that the plant has to use all of its energy just to get its roots a little bit down, it's not going to have as deep of roots, and it's not going to have the most successful plant life that it could have. And then also with compact soil, nutrients are less available in the same way that water is less available. So there's nowhere really for those nutrients or water to get absorbed into the soil or to wait for a plant to essentially use it. So tilling makes your soil a little more compact. It also makes a lot of things within the soil exposed to the elements. One thing that is exposed when you are tilling is the seed bank. And everyone's favorite thing about gardening is removing weeds, right? Most likely not. At least it's not mine, though sometimes it is very meditative to just sit and pull weeds. But if you don't have to, then why not do that method? So every time you till, that seed bank gets exposed, and it gets exposed to more water, more sunlight, and more nutrients. And that's everything that a plant wants to grow big and strong. And when we bring that seed bank up and expose it to those things that it needs to grow, it's already going to have a head start on anything that you plant. And it's going to create more competition for the things that you do plant. And it's just going to make it a headache to try to continuously remove that seed bank. It's also going to expose your soil to things like rain or wind. And those are things that contribute to soil erosion. So when you have your soil structure broken up and you remove any of that top plant material, even if it's sod, even if it's just a little bit of cover crop, those roots are holding the soil together. But when you remove that and break it up, you're more likely going to see your soil run off, especially when it rains. And then you're also going to see a loss of the goods, as I call it. So you're going to lose that organic matter, and that organic matter is what provides nutrients to your plant. It's what provides food for all of those microbes. It's also going to provide a nice, almost like sponge for water to be held. And when you till, that organic matter gets broken down, it gets buried deep within the soil layers, and it gets spread out to the point where there's not really a lot that's going to be available for plants, including what comes from organic matter. So again, those nutrients and those waters. And then in general, for you as the person planting, you're going to waste a lot of extra energy weeding constantly, watering more than what's probably needed if you didn't till, and you're going to spend a lot more money trying to get your soil perfect by buying soil amendments, buying any type of nutrient additives, and you're also probably going to have a little higher of a water bill. I don't know if that's something you pay super close attention to, but I manage our community garden, and that's something that I've definitely noticed in the past few years is the increase in water as we've continued to till more. And so this year we are actually going to a completely no-till system. So feel free to check back with me at the end of the summer to see how it's going, but so far it's going good. And so these things are all contributing factors of what happens when you till. And as we just learned a little bit ago, none of those things match what makes soil healthy. So healthy soil is not compact, it's not exposed to the elements, it's not lacking organic matter and nutrients, and it's not giving you another full-time job, essentially. So when we talk about NoDig, we are talking about all of the factors that go into soil health. NoDig is going to be something that promotes good soil health. It might be a little difficult at first, but that's going to be almost a one-time deal. So you are not going to have to worry as much about any of these negative side effects that tilling will give you. And so part of this presentation is a fun and easy way to prep a bed. And a lot of people I've realized don't fully understand what prepping a bed means. And so I thought I'd give a very quick definition of that. To prep a bed means that you're basically prepping the soil. So you are finding a location where are your plants going to be happiest, and I'll talk a little more about that later. And then you're going to find a spot and create an area and an environment that's going to set up your plants for success. So when you're prepping a bed, you're not going in and tilling soil, you're not taking all of the weeds out from last year, you're finding something in an area that either has good soil health, or you're creating an area and adding things that will make the soil a lot healthier. Weeding can be part of that, but it's usually not, especially when it comes to prepping an actual bed. And you can prep a bed using an existing bed, or you can even do just straight lawn. And that's what I've had the most experience doing. And so you'll see quite a few pictures of what it looks like to prep a bed using NoDig in just a lawn setting. So before I continue, I want to talk a little bit about this gentleman, Charles Dowding, or if you live in my household, he goes by the name Chucky D. I have never met him, and I probably wouldn't call him Chucky D. So if you are best friends with him, don't tell on me. But Charles Dowding is one of the most prominent NoDig promoters. He's located in England, and especially for Indiana, his soil is very similar to our soil. And so he is a really good resource to look into for his own methods versus someone who might be in San Diego and is having the worst time because there's so much sandy soil, they don't know what to do with it. But if you were to put them in our clay environment, they might quit their gardening jobs. But Charles Dowding says to feed the soil, not the plants. And that might sound wrong, but if we are considering that soil health is the key factor to having successful plants, having successful germination, having successful anything in the environment, then you want to make sure you're feeding your soil before you're feeding your plants. Once you feed the soil, you probably won't have to feed your plants. That's not something you'll need to worry about so much, to the point where a lot of my garden renters are out every single day watering their plants, because previously we tilled so much that most of our garden beds are soil, or soil, they're all soil, is clay soil. And so they're constantly having to water their plants and just seeing the water kind of run off and disperse in other directions, not to their plants. We have been able to fix that quite a bit through doing a lot of bed prep for NoDig methods. So again, feed the soil, not the plants. So that's our soil health spiel. I'll do a little pause to see if anyone has questions about soil health for the moment. It's not totally fine. We can get into the good stuff. Well, it's all good stuff.
Yeah, I don't think I see any questions.
Perfect. So heading into the crux of this talk, and pretty much everything you've been here for, you've been waiting for this moment. You want to know all about NoDig, how you can do it, why you should do it, and what the results are. So I have it broken down and hopefully some easy steps. And we're going to start first with the benefits. Well, actually, even before that, we're going to start with what is NoDig. It's often called no-till, no-dig, but it is more or less the same terminology. And so when you are doing no-dig, you are doing a method of gardening that involves minimal disturbance to the soil. So you are not digging as much into the soil. You're not tilling. You're not doing something that requires you to break up those layers in the soil and what they look like kind of naturally out in the forest. So like if you were to go out in the forest, usually you see a lot of leaves on the ground, and below those leaves you see a lot of insects, and those insects are crawling through darker soil. And the more you go down, the kind of harder, more compact that soil gets. When you're gardening, most people don't follow what natural soil looks like in the forest. Most people are trying to mix their soil up. They're trying to make it as easy as possible and as loose as possible to plant into. But without actually digging, you'll be able to have soil that is much easier to plant into. And so no-dig is method that means that you're not disturbing the soil that much or even at all. And so I know this is a lot of text, but there are a lot of benefits to doing no-dig methods. I've already talked a lot about soil health, but to go over that again, when you're doing no-dig, and I'll go through those steps so you can kind of see where these are coming from. But when you're doing no-dig, you're adding organic matter. And as we talked about, that's going to attract microorganisms and bacteria. It's going to include nutrients. It's going to be able to hold more water, and that all together is going to increase your soil health. Without interrupting the soil, having that minimal disturbance, you'll be able to retain that soil structure. So you don't have to worry about rebuilding the soil structure as much as you would if you till immediately and then try to plant back into it. So you'll retain the soil structure, which means that you don't have to worry about erosion control. You'll have better airflow, and you'll have less elemental impacts. So you won't have as much impacts from rain. You won't have as much impacts from wind. You won't have a lot of that soil or water loss. You'll have an active soil life, which is going to increase your overall soil fertility. And you're actually creating a little bit of a carbon sink. When you're using organic materials and you're relying on the soil to do what the soil wants to do, you're going to keep that carbon in the ground instead of kind of just losing it into the air. You're also going to have happier plants. I like to joke that this is the environmental method of happy wife, happy life. So happy soil means happy plants, means happy gardener. And so your plants are going to be a lot happier because they're going to have less things to compete with. They're going to have more room for deep root growth. And in turn, that's going to keep the soil where the soil is. So your plants also don't have to worry about becoming uprooted or being easily pulled out if an animal or some form of pest comes and wants to take a nibble on them. Your plants will also be happier because they'll have that porous soil, they'll have organic matter, which means that they will easily be able to access nutrients. They'll also easily be able to access water because, especially as some places move more into drought-stricken areas, having that water be accessible underground to your plants is going to help you and your plants a lot more. There's nothing worse than, being so busy, especially if you're someone that does rent out a community garden, for example. There's nothing worse than being too busy to go out to water, especially when it's super hot, or there's nothing worse than watering and immediately watching that water evaporate because you have such compact soil. It's just going to save so much time, and your plants are going to be so much happier and more independent. And then you, as the person planting, I hope, at least I find for myself, I'm a lot happier because I have to weed so much less, which also for those of us that are aging, I'm only 30, but once you hit 30, I feel it now. I know when the weather's changing in my knees, but there's a decrease in that need to bend, to kneel, and also this might be just a personal thing. There's a lot less needs for swearing or yelling out at weeds because they're very pokey or they're just constantly popping up and you can't seem to get ahead of them. So there's less need overall for all of that. There's also going to be less need for you to, as I said, go out and just constantly water and over and wonder why your plants aren't showing that they are getting the proper amount of water, or why they're not growing as tall as they should be, or producing as many flowers or fruits as they should be. You'll also have more time for productive work. And by productive work, I mean that you'll have more time to take care and focus on your plants as they grow versus spending your time weeding and feeling like you're always starting back out where you started when you first began your garden bed. So the less routine maintenance you have to do, the more you're going to be able to expand and grow and even have the time to propagate those plants, collect those seeds, do what you need to do to start your giant native plant private nursery. You're also, this is something that I find very cool, with that soil structure and with those air pockets, it actually means that the soil is going to be a lot stronger. And so you can actually walk on your beds and get directly into your plants without having to worry about crushing the soil or losing the water or having the soil even stick to your boots or your shoes or your bare feet, however you feel like gardening. But having that open structure of your soil is going to help you walk on it and not have it get so sticky and stuck to you all the time. And overall, you're just going to have more time to stop and appreciate what's growing and how it's growing, and be able to be a little more present with your garden, which is what we all want to do. We want to see all of our pollinators, all of our native and wild friends coming out and using the environment that we're hoping to promote for them. And so the less work you have to do just maintaining, the more you're going to be able to enjoy what you're actually creating. And so all of that information is well and good, but how do you actually do it? So we have a beautiful 5-step method that I have come up with completely on my own. No one else helped me. Just kidding. I do have a list of resources that I've used in the past that have helped me get to a point where I now have a 5-step method and how to do this. So I will be sharing those with you. But in the meantime, how do you do it? You are going to start by choosing a method. So number one is, these are the 2 methods that I use. As I mentioned, I'm going to talk a little more about one than the other, but I also wanted to give this option. For NoDig, sometimes you can start by doing just a little bit of digging, or you can just completely NoDig. You'll never put a shovel into the ground ever again. Also great. If you're someone who isn't quite convinced, and just really, you just feel so much better if you did a little dig, there is a method, and essentially, this is actually my husband. Don't tell him, he's in a lot of my photos, but it's also his fault for not taking photos when I'm doing these things. So he now has to be my guinea pig. But basically, for a little dig, you are digging into the soil in an area marked out. So whatever shape you wanted. In this instance, we were just doing one really long rectangle just to see how this method worked. And what you're going to do is outline the shape you want. If you can see my cursor, you can see that he's digging into the soil with the shovel. You're only going in a couple of inches, and you're going to do that all the way around the perimeter of your shape. And then you're going to cut those shapes into smaller shapes, and you're going to grab that big chunk that you just now loosened from the soil, and you're going to flip it upside down. And when you flip it upside down, you are kind of smothering the sod or the grass in a way that will expose its roots to all of the elements, which will make it not want to grow as much. And if you just flip it over, you're having grass kind of add to that organic material in the top. And so it should, at the end, look like this. However, this is not a foolproof method. And this did grow a really nice, long, very random strip of wildflowers in our front yard. However, everywhere that we dug into ended up exposing more weeds in the seed bank. And so though we had a nice row of flowers all the way down the center, completely around the perimeter, this is just nonstop weeds coming up. And so it can work, but I would recommend, if you are doing this method, to at least do some more prep around the perimeter. So that can be in the form of mulch, just raw wood chips, or if you wanted to do something else that's wild and crazy, feel free to. That was my experience with that method. So it is possible, if you still want to do a little bit of digging, to still focus on soil health while doing a little bit of digging. But if you want to go with my method number 2, which is completely no dig, then that's where my 5-step system kind of comes in. And so the very first thing you want to do, besides going out and finding just kind of a random patch, you're actually going to want to go out and focus on your location first. So again, we're looking to feed the soil, not the plants. However, you want to pick a location that will benefit the plants themselves. And so the first thing you're going to do is hopefully research your plants and choose the plants that are native to your environment and will thrive in whatever type of ecosystems you have wherever you're going to be planting. And so if you have nothing but shade, look for more plants that are able to survive in shade. If you are someone with clay soil or someone that lives near a wetland, look for something that is okay being wet. I like to say plants that like to have their feet wet do a lot better in things like clay soil or a little more of a wetland area. If you have plants that are just like, I need full sun, then definitely find a location that has full sun. And once you kind of pick the plants you want, you can go out, and then I truly go out with the little yard flags, and I mark the spots that I think would be great for a new bed. And once I have those spots marked, they match what the plants need to survive. I then move on to some more personal preferences and things that will benefit me and the plants. So the very first thing I like to look for is the closest water source. And so if you're making a bed at home, then you'll probably want to be as close as possible to a spigot or hose. Or you can move on to the fourth step and decide, is this a place where I find it really, really annoying to mow, or I find it really hard to kind of do anything in this area. I don't visit it as much. It's whatever to me. Those are the areas I tend to gravitate towards so that I can continue to reduce my mowing and start with the ones that I find the most annoying. And then the most important thing when prepping a bed, even when you're doing no dig, if you're putting anything into the soil, make sure you call before you dig. And so there's that, I think it's 811 number you call, or you can look it up online, and you can have your power, your gas, your electric company come out and mark where all of those lines and pipes are. That's something you do want to avoid, and not just kind of go wild and chaotically dig and accidentally hit something and ruin the power for your neighborhood. You don't want to be that guy. So always call before you dig. Now, going back into
Autumn, if I could give you a time check, it's
Yeah.
about 6:18. In
perfect.
case you're
Thank you. And this section is fairly quick. So this is where my 5 steps come in. Very first step is you're going to want to smother the area. So after you've picked out your plants, you've narrowed down the areas you want to plant in, you know exactly where things are going, then you want to smother it with love, and also with things like cardboard. You can get used billboard ads, and you can use tarps using they're the big billboard sheets and tarps. They are a little more expensive, and using those does require you to plan a bit ahead. And so you'll want to put those down a couple of months before you actually go to prepare your bed, because you need to give it time to completely kill all the grass that's underneath it or all the weeds that's underneath it. However, if you're impatient like I am, my favorite trick is to use cardboard. And so using cardboard, you lay it directly on top of the grass, and it's going to not only smother everything that's underneath it, but when it gets wet, it's going to retain moisture, and it will quickly decompose, so that it's going to add a little more organic material. You do want to make sure that you're using cardboard that has not been treated. There are different packaging stickers that you can look up to make sure that your cardboard's not being treated. And you'll also want to make sure that you remove any tape or stickers so that you're not just getting stuck with a lot of plastic bits. So you can kind of see there was one that almost got put in this picture that had some stickers on it, and we were able to see that and quickly remove it. So cardboard is a fantastic thing to use to smother your soil, and usually recycling centers are very happy to let you just come and take stacks of it. After you've smothered your area, you want to determine what's going to be walkways and what's going to be your actual beds that you're going to plant into. And anything that's going to be a walkway, you are going to want to smother it with wood chips. Now you can do double duty and put wood chips over the cardboard. In this instance, I had a group of volunteers, and we got a little cardboard happy and ran out. And so we quickly pivoted and just filled the grassy areas in our walkways with wood chips. But if you're using cardboard and wood chips, or just wood chips, you're going to want to make sure to do at least a layer of about 2 to 3 inches thick, because the goal is to block out all sunlight so that anything that is below those wood chips, anything that's below the cardboard, is not going to get sunlight to reach and be able to grow. After you have your walkways done, then the areas that you're going to designate for planting, you're going to, again, smother it, make sure there's cardboard underneath, and then you're going to put about 2 to 6 layers of compost. And every time you finish a layer of compost, you're gonna use your little feet and you're gonna just tamper that area down. It's not 100% compacting the soil, because you're actually adding soil up. You're adding onto the already existing soil, and kind of tamping down the compost that you're using is going to help that stick together. So when you go to water, that soil is not going to be loose and just kind of run off and run away. So making sure that you're tamping that down will prevent soil loss. It'll also help you get a true 2 to 6 inches of compost so that you can plant into it directly. And again, the cardboard that's underneath it will decompose and will add more organic matter, more carbon, more nutrients to that area. After you have your composted areas filled in, your wood chip walkways filled in, everything smothered that you want it, you're actually going to water everything. And so this was that patch that I showed a couple pictures ago where volunteers helped me out. We were doing a little pumpkin patch for demonstration, and as soon as we finished it, we watered everything. So we watered the wood chips, we watered the compost areas, we watered everything. That's going to help you see if you were short a couple of inches in any additional spots. And it's also going to already start working to retain that moisture. When the cardboard gets wet, it's going to get heavy, and it's going to make sure that all of that sunlight is blocked out. And after you've watered everything, you're going to be able to finally start planting whatever you want to plant in these areas. Water those seeds in if you're doing seeds, water those plants in if you're doing plants, and you're going to be able to sit back and enjoy. And that seems like, at least at first glance, a really easy method, but it is going to make everything 10 times easier than the method it looks like. And you also might be thinking, if it's so easy, how do we know it works? Well, this patch we experimented with and did not pull a single weed, did not do anything to it. And this was in May when we made this. And well, there's a plot twist, you can't see it. But I'll go back and show you at the end. Essentially, there were very little weeds compared to a plot that had been tilled and not weeded at all. And then even with this is another community garden plot. This was started in early May, and this is what it looked like in June. And so you can see there's some amount of smart weed popping up, but overall there's not a lot. And again, that was after not touching it or doing much weeding. So this was almost 2 months later. And then this was in August. Again, very little weeding happened, but there's so few weeds to compete with these plants that they're actually thriving and growing very quickly compared to, if you kind of look beyond, this was a plot that was tilled and they got a little behind on weeding, but they started at the same time as this plot. And so you can see already just the impact of not having to weed, and this plot was also probably watered once a week, if that. And so just the amount of moisture in the soil, in the wood chips, and in the cardboard really helped it out. And then for everyone that's looking for native plants, this was a rain garden I put together using the exact same method. So this is all completely cardboard. This is a wood chip path, and then these are rain garden plants that I planted from small starts. Planted this end of May, and this was in October. So, and I didn't touch it at all because kind of once I get home, I'm kind of done with gardening, especially if I do it at work. And so I didn't do much weeding on it. But again, you can see there's not much to be done. And so really helps out. Versus this is an up close of about 2 weeks after a plot was tilled and not managed. All of this Canada thistle just immediately popped up. And if you know anything about Canada thistle, it's very pokey and is really hard to get rid of. So again, another little pro of if you just smother everything, you don't have to deal with it, and it saves you so much time. So I do want to leave time for questions, and I'm happy to stay on a little later. But just to recap, if you are moving to tilling, be prepared to do a lot more weeding and be prepared to add a lot more back to your soil. If you're going no-till, be prepared to not do as much weeding and be prepared to see your plants grow a lot stronger. And I'm not sure why my little template still has space themes on it, so don't look at those ones. And then again, this is that method for making your no-till garden. But we'll paste resources in the chat. You're more than welcome to email me as well. Here's my email to get those resources directly. But I hope you learned something, and I'm now happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Autumn. I've used the cardboard and chips method quite a bit through the years, and it does a good job. Let's see, we do have a few messages in the last few minutes here, or a few questions, I believe. Let me see here. Somebody was asking about soil testing, and I'm sorry I flowed down. Do you do any soil testing beforehand? Okay.
Soil testing isn't entirely required for this method. The garden plot that you saw the most of, we actually waited 2 years before we did soil testing, and I did soil testing two separate tests where I tested the no-till plot and then I tested the plots that were tilled, and it was about double the amount of nutrients and organic matter that was in the no-till plot as compared to the tilled plot. A lot of those had very little of anything, and the no-till plot was previously a tilled plot. So with just 2 years, we were able to double the amount of soil health needs. So at any point in the process, you can definitely test your soil. You don't have to do it before.
That was Julie Searcy, by the way. Thanks, Julie. Stephanie Grant talks about, she actually sources newspapers and cardboard from her local library, mulching with leaves in the fall as well. So good. Let's see here. By the way, we have shared the links in the chat. If you haven't seen those, we've also shared the links for native seed community stuff as well. Let's see here. Jim Taylor, a long-handled concrete screen works well for spreading mulch. Great, 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 great. Good info from Jim Taylor. How did you kill the Canada thistles that came up?
First, I shot lasers out of my eyes mentally. Second,
It's hard.
I ended up, we heavily smothered that area. And then unfortunately, that gardener was no longer able to continue, so we didn't get to see how it played out. But I did put a very thick tarp over the top of it for about a year. And this year we'll be doing the cardboard and wood chip method, and I'll have that bed not rented so that we can make sure that that thistle is at least dead for a year. So the outcome is to be determined.
It's tough, yeah.
Yeah.
That was from Diana O'Brien. Let's see. Does it not matter then that your bed you're planting into is 4 to 9 inches taller than the surrounding area?
Yeah, so I get that question a lot, and it's actually more beneficial if your area that you're planting is taller than the surrounding area. You don't want it lower because anything higher is going to spill off and run off into your bed. So that includes anything, especially if you're in a community garden, anything from anyone else's plots can run into your area. But if you're the highest one, your water is going to run off to the side, or it's just going to be able to absorb further down before it starts to run off. So it gives a much better chance for water retention.
Good. Nan is asking, can you use this method when planting our native flowers or even shrubs are in 4 to 6 inch pots? So in other words, can these still go in on top of the cardboard, or do we have to cut through?
Yes, you can definitely use plants that are in those types of pots, and your options are to either build a taller compost layer, or what I've done, because again, I'm an impatient gardener, I do cut a hole in that cardboard, but then I make sure to mulch, not all the way up to the stem of your plant because you don't want to cause any rot. But I do mulch around the plant area even after I've already cut the cardboard and put compost over the top of it. That's a great question.
Let's see, it looks like we have one more from Beth. Actually, I think it's a comment. The cardboard that is in between layers on pallets at Costco is a great to use in large pieces. Right, recycle centers are really a good place to get them as well, get the cardboard and all.
Awesome.
All
Well,
right,
those are all great questions.
I think that's it. Probably we're a few minutes after, but thanks so much, Autumn.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. We have shared all the contacts in all the information and contacts in the chat. We do invite you to go to our Facebook group. Pictures and videos are quite welcome of how your propagation is going. And if you're doing any of this, if you're preparing a bed, please do share the before and after pictures. That would be great. Also, as I mentioned, and as our pattern, we are doing these on a monthly basis. And every quarter, we're also having Ray Major from Trees from Seed do a luncheon Q&A. So, but if you have other people, and I did mention this at the beginning, that you may think would be good for us all to hear from. Maybe they're good at propagating native plants from seed, or maybe there's a program or a project that you think is worth spotlighting that covers this whole growing native plants from seed and being able to use them in your communities and so forth. We'd be really appreciative of that. We'll be communicating soon our next month's presentation, which, as I mentioned, I'll be doing on growing native plants from seed and also introducing a little bit more about native seed communities. So thanks again, Autumn, for your informative session. I'd also like to thank Deb Howson for helping with the technical aspects and some of the background needs and the security types of activities. but it was good to see you all. We'll sign off for now, and happy growing native plants from seed. Bye-bye, y'all. Thanks.